For years, the boy lived in a mansion built on wealth, but shadowed by sorrow. Born into privilege, he had everything except the ability to walk. Doctors called it permanent. Therapists gave up. Even his own father, a hardened millionaire, quietly stopped hoping. Then came a woman no one expected to matter, the new maid. She wasn't dressed in white coats or holding expensive equipment. She carried only strength, humility, and something the family's riches could never buy: faith in the impossible. One ordinary afternoon, she did something so unthinkable that it pulled the boy from despair and left the entire household shaken. Daniel Prescott was heir to one of the wealthiest families in the city. His father, Charles Prescott, owned a chain of international companies. Their mansion stood like a palace, with manicured lawns, imported chandeliers, and cars worth more than entire neighborhoods. Yet in the heart of all that luxury, Daniel lived like a prisoner. From birth, his legs had failed him. Countless specialists had delivered the same grim verdict: he would never walk. By age 8, Daniel had resigned himself to the wheelchair, learning to maneuver through gilded hallways while the world moved freely around him. Charles loved his son deeply, but carried shame in his silence. To him, weakness was unacceptable, and Daniel's condition felt like a stain on the family name. He spent millions on treatments, therapies, and world-renowned doctors, but nothing worked. Eventually, he poured himself back into business, leaving Daniel surrounded by staff who catered to his needs but never his soul. It was in this environment that a new maid, Grace Williams, was hired. She was unlike the polished servants the Prescotts usually employed. A black woman in her 40s, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She didn't treat Daniel like porcelain or pity him as others did. Instead, she spoke to him as though he were whole, as though she saw something inside him others had overlooked. Grace's presence unsettled the rhythm of the household. She hummed hymns while working, spoke softly of resilience, and often gazed out the window as if she saw beyond the walls of wealth. To Daniel, she was at first a curiosity, then slowly, a source of comfort. No one knew that this woman, hired to clean floors, would one day become the spark that set Daniel's world ablaze. Grace noticed what no doctor, therapist, or servant had ever seen. Daniel's eyes dimmed not because of his legs, but because no one believed in him anymore. He had been reduced to a diagnosis, a patient number, a problem to be managed. What he lacked wasn't strength, it was hope. One morning, while dusting shelves in the sunlit playroom, Grace observed Daniel staring at the garden outside. His hands gripped the wheels of his chair, but his body sagged with defeat. Instead of offering pity, she asked him about the garden, about what he would do if he could stand there. Daniel spoke hesitantly at first, then with surprising detail, how he'd run barefoot in the grass, chase butterflies, and climb the oak tree like other boys. Grace encouraged him not with false promises, but with challenges. She asked him to imagine lifting himself an inch higher each day. She showed him small exercises, not medical techniques, but simple, playful movements. While other maids scolded her for overstepping, Grace persisted. She told Daniel stories of people who had endured worse and risen stronger. At first, Daniel resisted. Years of disappointment had built walls around him. But Grace's unshakable belief slowly seeped through. She applauded even the tiniest twitch of his legs, celebrated his efforts, and reminded him daily that his worth wasn't defined by what he couldn't do. Meanwhile, Charles noticed the changes. He dismissed Grace's influence as nonsense, insisting only expensive experts could make a difference. Yet Daniel's laughter grew louder, his eyes brighter, his spirit lighter. Grace's quiet revolution was working in ways money never had. Then came the afternoon that no one in the mansion would forget. The housekeeper had left Daniel in the living room, and Grace walked in to find him struggling with determination, sweat dripping as he gripped the side of the sofa. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He was trying. Grace rushed to his side, not to hold him up, but to encourage him. "One more push," she whispered, her voice steady, her eyes fierce with belief. Daniel's body trembled, his legs shook, and then he stood. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't graceful. But for the first time in his life, Daniel's feet touched the ground, carrying the weight of his body. The mansion erupted with gasps as servants rushed in. Charles, arriving home early, froze in the doorway at the sight. His son, his fragile, wheelchair-bound boy, was standing, supported only by the fire in his eyes. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Daniel took a shaky step forward. His legs quivered, but Grace was there, steadying him not with her hands but with her voice. Each inch forward felt like an eternity, but the message was clear. The impossible was happening. Charles's face hardened, torn between disbelief and awe. He had spent millions, yet this maid, this woman he barely acknowledged, had achieved what money couldn't. Pride battled shame within him as his empire seemed smaller than the miracle before him. Daniel stumbled, nearly falling, but Grace urged him on. The boy's eyes locked on his father's, silently declaring that he was more than a burden, more than a diagnosis. He was alive, capable, free. And in that moment, Charles broke. Tears, long suppressed by pride, welled in his eyes. His son had not just learned to stand, he had shattered the chains of doubt, proving that faith and perseverance could outshine all the wealth in the world. From that day, Daniel's journey was forever changed. Progress was slow, filled with setbacks, but he no longer accepted the word impossible. Grace became not just a maid, but a mentor, a force of resilience in his life. With every stumble, she reminded him that strength wasn't in perfection but persistence. Charles, humbled by the experience, offered Grace more than a salary. He funded programs in her name to support disadvantaged children with disabilities, those whom society had written off. The millionaire, who once measured worth in profit, now understood it lay in faith, compassion, and the courage to believe when no one else would. Daniel's story spread quietly at first, then widely. It inspired therapists, parents, and children as they faced their challenges. Yet in the Prescott mansion, the truest transformation wasn't the boy's first steps, but the father's awakening, that dignity and miracles don't come from wealth, but from humanity. So ask yourself, how often do we underestimate the power of belief, especially when it comes from the most unexpected places? Sometimes, the greatest healers aren't the ones with diplomas or titles, but those who refuse to give up on us, even when the world has already walked away.